I'm Sophia Johnson, 22 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my entire world shifted on its axis. My parents bought my younger brother a brand new BMW for his high school graduation, while I got a text that said, "Congrats on your college graduation, sweetie," with a thumbs up emoji. But what they did when Harvard called to offer me a full scholarship for graduate school was even worse. If you've ever felt like the invisible child in your own family, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join thousands of others who understand this particular brand of heartbreak. The whole mess started 5 years ago in the most unlikely place, a 24-hour laundromat in downtown Portland at 2 in the morning. I was a freshman at Portland State, surviving on ramen and stubbornness, washing my single load of clothes during off-peak hours to save $3. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, and the place smelled like industrial detergent mixed with the ghost of cigarettes from when smoking was still allowed indoors. I was hunched over my macroeconomics textbook, highlighter in hand, when someone dropped their phone right next to my basket of damp towels. "Oh man, please tell me that didn't crack," came this voice, warm like honey tea on a sore throat. I looked up to see this guy, with paint-stained fingers, picking up an iPhone, with a case covered in tiny sunflowers. He had the kind of messy brown hair that looked intentional but probably wasn't, and when he smiled, I noticed he had a small gap between his front teeth that somehow made him more attractive, not less. "Looks intact," I said, handing it back to him. Though I'm not sure why anyone would put sunflowers on their phone case. "My little sister made it for me," he said, settling into the plastic chair next to mine without invitation. "She's 8 and thinks I need more joy in my life. Apparently my natural aesthetic is sad college boy." He gestured at his oversized flannel and paint-splattered jeans. "I'm James, by the way. And before you ask, yes, I know it's weird to do laundry at 2 a.m. Art projects don't keep normal hours. That's how I met my best friend, my confidant, the person who would become my chosen family when my biological one proved they never really wanted the job." James Chen was a studio art major with calloused hands from sculpture work and an uncanny ability to make even the most mundane moments feel like adventures. He kept a sketchbook in his back pocket and drew on napkins when he was thinking. He made terrible coffee but excellent grilled cheese sandwiches. He remembered that I preferred my pizza without cheese because dairy made me break out, and he never once made me feel weird about it. Over the next 3 years, James and I built something I'd never experienced before. A relationship based on actually seeing each other. He noticed when I was stressed before exams, and would show up with my favorite tea from this tiny shop near campus. I learned that he called his grandmother every Sunday morning, and that he was afraid of butterflies but would never admit it to anyone else. We studied together in the library until security kicked us out, shared midnight runs to the grocery store for ice cream, and spent countless hours in his cluttered studio apartment, where canvases leaned against every wall like colorful sentries. My family barely acknowledged his existence. During the rare phone calls home, if I mentioned James, my mother would make this little sound that somehow conveyed both disinterest and mild disapproval. My father never asked about him at all. My younger brother Jake, their golden child, could mention any random person from his high school, and suddenly it was 20 questions about their family, their plans, their favorite color. But James, who had been there for me through academic probation, food poisoning, and the great roommate disaster of sophomore year, might as well have been invisible. The golden period of my life wasn't marked by luxury or achievement. It was marked by feeling genuinely known. James and I had this routine where we'd meet at Cafe Vita every Thursday morning before our respective 9 a.m. classes. He'd order this ridiculous drink with oat milk and 3 shots of espresso, and I'd get plain black coffee because I was saving money for textbooks. We'd sit at the corner table with the wobbly leg, and he'd show me whatever he'd been working on that week while I complained about my economics professors who seemed to think sleep was optional. "You know what's wild?" James said one October morning, sketching something in the margins of my notebook. "You light up when you talk about economic theory, but you get this defeated look whenever your family calls." He'd drawn a tiny bird in the corner of my page, wings spread like it was about to take flight. "That's ridiculous," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew he was right. My family had this way of making me feel simultaneously too much and not enough. Too serious about school, but not serious enough about family obligations. Too independent, but not successful enough to justify that independence. We made plans during those coffee dates. James wanted to move to Seattle after graduation. maybe find studio space and actually try to make it as an artist. I dreamed of graduate school, maybe law school, somewhere that would let me use my brain for something bigger than myself. We talked about getting an apartment together, somewhere with good light for his paintings and quiet space for my studying. We planned weekend trips to the coast, talked about adopting a cat, debated whether we'd ever be the type of people who hosted dinner parties. I felt safe in those plans. James made me feel like I deserved good things, like my dreams weren't too big or too small, but exactly the right size for the person I was becoming. When I was with him, I didn't feel like I was constantly auditioning for love and acceptance. I didn't have to earn his attention or compete for his affection. It was just freely given, the way love should be. But there were small signs that something wasn't quite right in my family dynamic, signs I should have paid more attention to. Like how my mother always seemed to call during my study time, never during James's visit times, or when I might actually want to chat. How my father would ask about my grades with this tone that suggested he expected disappointment. How conversations about Jake's achievements would go on for 20 minutes. But my Dean's List recognition got a "that's nice, honey" before the subject changed to Jake's baseball schedule. The most telling sign came during spring break of my junior year. I'd been invited to visit Jake's graduation prep activities, but the invitation came with strings attached. "We're so excited you can help with the party planning," my mother had said. Not "we're excited to see you," or "we've missed you." I was invited as free labor, not as family. That should have been my first real clue about what was coming. But I was too caught up in my own little world of coffee dates and study sessions, and feeling genuinely cared for to notice that my family had already made their choice about which child mattered more. I was about to learn that lesson in the most painful way possible. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday in May. I woke up in my tiny studio apartment that smelled like the Vietnamese restaurant downstairs, made instant coffee in the mug James had painted for me in his ceramics class, and reviewed my notes for my final macroeconomics exam. The morning light filtered through my single window, casting everything in that soft golden glow that made even my shabby furniture look intentional. I had this feeling of anticipation, like something good was about to happen, though I couldn't put my finger on what. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Jake's graduation is this weekend. Dad booked dinner at Canlis for Sunday. Dress nice." Canlis was the expensive restaurant in Seattle, where my parents took clients when they wanted to impress them. I'd never eaten there, but I'd heard them talk about the prices in hushed, reverent tones. This felt significant. I spent the morning in my exam, working through supply and demand curves and calculating consumer surplus, with the kind of focus that came from genuine interest in the subject. Economics made sense to me in a way that family dynamics never had. There were rules, predictable outcomes, logical cause and effect. When I walked out of that classroom, I felt confident and accomplished. I'd worked hard for 4 years, maintained a 3.8 GPA, while working part-time at the campus bookstore, and I was graduating debt-free thanks to scholarships and careful budgeting. I called James from the steps of the academic building, squinting in the bright afternoon sunlight. "Exam went great," I told him. "I think I actually nailed the question about market failures. Want to celebrate with terrible pizza?" "Can't tonight," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm putting the finishing touches on your graduation present. But tomorrow we're definitely celebrating. I'm thinking that place with the enormous milkshakes you pretend not to love." That evening, I drove the 3 hours to my parents' house in Bellevue, singing along to my carefully curated road trip playlist, and feeling optimistic about the weekend. I'd packed my nicest dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for job interviews, and I'd even splurged on new earrings. I wanted to look like the successful college graduate I was about to become. The house looked exactly the same as always. Imposing brick facade, perfectly manicured lawn, the kind of landscaping that required professional maintenance. My father's Mercedes was in the driveway next to my mother's Lexus, both cars worth more than I'd spent on my entire college education. I parked my battered Honda Civic behind them and grabbed my overnight bag, feeling that familiar twist in my stomach that always came with returning home. "Sophia," my mother called from the kitchen as I walked through the front door. Perfect timing. We just opened a bottle of wine to celebrate. I found my parents and Jake clustered around the kitchen island, champagne flutes in hand, looking like something out of a lifestyle magazine. My mother had clearly been to the salon recently. Her blonde highlights were perfect, her makeup flawless despite it being 7 o'clock at night. My father wore his standard uniform of khakis and a button-down, looking like the successful financial advisor he was. And Jake, 17 and cocky, stood between them wearing a Letterman jacket that cost more than my monthly rent. "There's our college graduate," my father said, raising his glass. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." For a moment, I felt that warm glow of approval I'd been chasing my whole life. Maybe this weekend would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me the way James did, as someone worth celebrating, worth investing in. But the real celebration, my mother continued, her voice rising with excitement, is for Jake's graduation present. That's when I noticed the BMW key fob sitting on the counter like a small silver bomb waiting to explode my expectations. Jake picked it up, grinning that cocky smile that made him look exactly like our father at 17. "Brand new 328, Jake announced. "Midnight blue with the premium package. Dad says every graduate needs a reliable car for their next chapter." I stood there in my parents' kitchen, holding my overnight bag like a shield, watching my brother dangle car keys worth more than I'd earned in 2 years of work study. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright, too warm, too small. The smell of whatever expensive dinner my mother had prepared made my stomach turn. That's incredible." I managed, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Very generous. We figured he's going to need something dependable for commuting to UW, my father explained, as if I'd asked for justification. "Can't have him taking the bus like some common student." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been taking the bus for 4 years, along with walking, biking, and occasionally bumming rides from James when the weather was particularly awful. I'd never once complained about it, never asked for help with transportation. I'd figured out my own solutions because that's what you did when you were the responsible child. "Where's my glass?" I asked, nodding toward the champagne bottle. "Oh," my mother said, looking genuinely surprised. "I thought you didn't drink during exam week." "Exams are over, Mom. I graduated. Remember?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jake shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in his new car keys. My father cleared his throat and reached for another glass from the cabinet. "Of course," my mother said quickly. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm just so excited about Jake's present that I lost track. You know how I get when I'm planning celebrations." As I stood there sipping champagne that tasted like ashes in my mouth, watching my parents fawn over Jake and his expensive new car, I realized that I wasn't really part of this celebration at all. I was an audience member, expected to clap and smile and play my role as the supportive older sister who was just grateful to be included. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom that had been converted into my mother's craft room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I was feeling. It wasn't just about the car, though the car certainly stung. It was about the pattern, the clear message that my achievements deserved acknowledgement while Jake's deserved investment. I'd graduated with honors, debt-free, with job prospects and graduate school possibilities. Jake had barely maintained a C average and was going to the local state school because it was the only place that accepted him. But he got the car. He got the celebration dinner at the expensive restaurant. He got my parents' pride and attention and financial support. And I got a champagne flute that was an afterthought. I pulled out my phone to text James, then put it away again. How could I explain this without sounding petty? How could I articulate that it wasn't about the money or the car, but about feeling invisible in my own family? The next morning, everything got worse. I woke up to the sound of voices in the kitchen, my parents and Jake discussing plans for the day. When I came downstairs, still in my pajamas, they were huddled around Jake's laptop, looking at car insurance quotes and discussing which parking permit he'd need for campus. "Morning, sweetie," my mother said absently, not looking up from the screen. "There's coffee in the pot." I poured myself a cup and stood at the counter, watching them plan Jake's future with the kind of attention and care I'd never experienced. They were researching dorm meal plans, discussing class schedules, even looking up the best routes from campus to home for weekend visits. "What about you, Sophia?" my father asked suddenly, as if just remembering I existed. "Any big plans after graduation?" "I'm applying to graduate programs," I said. "Actually, I heard back from a few schools this week. Some really good news." "That's nice," my mother said, still focused on the laptop screen. "Jake, look at this meal plan. The premium one includes late-night dining, perfect for when you're studying." I stood there with my coffee growing cold, waiting for someone to ask about my news, to show even a flicker of interest in my future. But they were too busy planning Jake's life to notice that I might have something important to share. "I should probably start looking at apartments in Seattle," I said, testing whether anyone was actually listening. My father murmured. "Jake, We should probably set up your bank account transfers before you move into the dorms. That's when I realized that I could probably announce I was moving to Mars and they wouldn't notice as long as Jake needed something. I finished my coffee in silence and went back upstairs to shower, feeling more alone than I had since that night in the laundromat when I'd first met James. The graduation dinner at Canlis that evening was everything I'd expected, and nothing I'd hoped for. The restaurant was gorgeous, east floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Union, servers who moved like dancers, food that looked like art. I wore my navy dress and new earrings and felt completely out of place at my own celebration dinner, because it wasn't really my celebration dinner at all. Jake monopolized the conversation, talking about his plans for college, his excitement about joining a fraternity, his ideas for spring break trips. My parents hung on every word, asking follow-up questions, offering advice, sharing stories about their own college experiences. When the server asked about dessert, my mother clapped her hands together. We should definitely get something special. This is such a momentous occasion. For both of us, I added quietly. Of course, my father said, but his tone suggested he'd forgotten again that I was graduating too. The dessert arrived with a single candle in it. Congratulations, Jake, the server said, having obviously been briefed on who the celebration was for. Nobody corrected him. I excused myself to the bathroom after dessert. Not because I needed to use it, but because I needed a moment to breathe. I stood in the marble and gold opulence of the women's restroom, staring at my reflection and trying to understand how I'd become so invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. When I returned to the table, my parents were already paying the check. Jake was on his phone, probably texting friends about his new car. Nobody asked if I'd enjoyed my meal, or if I wanted to stay longer, or what I wanted to do to celebrate my own graduation. The drive home was quiet. I sat in the back seat like a child, watching the Seattle skyline disappear behind us, feeling like I was disappearing too. That night, I finally texted James, "Family dinner was brutal. Can't wait to get back to Portland tomorrow." His response came immediately. "Want to talk about it? I'm up late working on your present anyway." Tomorrow, I typed back. "I just need to get through tonight, but I wouldn't be getting back to Portland the next day." Because that's when the phone call came that changed everything and revealed just how little my family actually cared about my success. The call came at 9:17 a.m. on Monday morning. I was in my childhood bedroom, packing the overnight bag I'd optimistically brought for what I'd hoped would be a weekend of celebration. The ringtone was unfamiliar, not the generic iPhone tone I usually heard, but something official sounding and urgent. "Is this Sophia Johnson?" The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of warmth. "Yes, this is Sophia. This is Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Harvard Kennedy School's admissions office. I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to personally deliver some exciting news about your graduate school application." I sat down hard on my old twin bed, my legs suddenly feeling like they couldn't support me. Harvard, I'd applied on a whim, mostly because James had dared me to. "You're smarter than half the people who go there," he'd said. "What's the worst that could happen? They say no? Miss Johnson, are you still there?" "Yes. Sorry, I'm here. I'm delighted to inform you that you've not only been accepted to our Master's in Public Policy program, but you've been selected for our Dean's Fellowship. This is a full scholarship covering tuition, housing, and a substantial living stipend. It's one of only 5 awarded each year from a pool of over 3,000 applicants." The room spun slightly. I gripped the phone tighter. Sure, I'd misheard something. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Dr. Martinez laughed, a warm sound that somehow made this surreal moment feel real. "You've been awarded a full scholarship to Harvard Kennedy School, Sophia. Full tuition, housing allowance, and a $35,000 annual stipend for living expenses. The fellowship also includes funding for a summer internship with a policy organization of your choice." This is incredible. I can't believe this is real. It's very real. Your application was extraordinary. Your undergraduate thesis on economic inequality in rural communities, your volunteer work with the Homeless Services Coalition, your academic record. The committee was particularly impressed with your recommendation letters. Someone wrote that you have the rare combination of intellectual rigor and genuine compassion that makes for transformative policy work. I knew exactly who had written that. Professor Williams, my econometrics instructor who'd become a mentor when I'd started staying after class to discuss applications of economic theory to social problems. She'd been the one to suggest I apply to Harvard in the first place. The fellowship begins in September, Dr. Martinez continued. We'll be sending you an official packet with all the details, but I wanted to call personally because this is truly an exceptional honor. You should be very proud. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Harvard. Full scholarship. One of 5 students, chosen from 3,000 applicants. This was bigger than anything I'd ever imagined for myself. This was life-changing, future-altering, dream-exceeding news. I could hear my family downstairs. The clink of coffee cups, the murmur of conversation, Jake's voice rising with laughter over something my father had said. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. When they'd finally see me the way I deserved to be seen. When my achievements would be impossible to ignore or minimize. I practically floated down the stairs, my heart hammering with excitement and possibility. I found them exactly where I'd left them. Around the kitchen island, still focused on Jake's transition to college life. My mother was making a list of dorm room essentials, while my father and Jake debated the merits of different campus gyms. Mom, Dad, Jake, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained excitement. I just got the most incredible call. My mother looked up briefly. That's nice, honey. Jake, do you think you'll need the extra long twin sheets? No, seriously, this is huge. I just got accepted to Harvard. Graduate school, with a full scholarship. The kitchen went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then my father said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," in the same tone he might use to acknowledge that I'd told him the weather forecast. It's not just acceptance. I pressed on, desperate to make them understand the magnitude of this. It's a fellowship, one of only 5 awarded in the entire program. Full tuition, housing, plus a living stipend. They called it exceptional. How much is the stipend? Jake asked, looking mildly interested for the first time. $35,000 a year. Huh, he said, then immediately turned back to my father. Dad, what did you think about that fraternity rush information? The Sigma Chi house looked pretty cool. I stood there, watching them seamlessly transition back to discussing Jake's social life at college, feeling like I'd just announced I'd won the lottery and been told to keep it down because the adults were talking. This is Harvard, I said again, louder this time. Harvard Kennedy School. One of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. We heard you, honey, my mother said, not looking up from her list. That's really nice. Very impressive. Nice. She'd called a full scholarship to Harvard nice, the same way she'd described the weather or a pleasant lunch. I felt something crack inside my chest, a hairline fracture that would eventually split me wide open. I need to call James, I said, backing toward the stairs. Who's James again? My father asked absently. My best friend. For the past 4 years. The person who's been in my life longer than Jake's been driving. Nobody responded to that. They were already back to their list making and planning, their careful orchestration of Jake's future. I stood there for another moment, waiting for someone to ask about the details, to want to know more, to show even a fraction of the excitement they'd displayed over Jake's car. Nothing. I went upstairs and called James, my hands shaking as I dialed. Soph, how was the family dinner? Please tell me they at least acknowledged your existence this time. James. My voice broke on his name. I got into Harvard. The silence on the other end was different from my family's silence. This was stunned, processing, about to explode with joy silence. You got into Harvard, he repeated slowly. Full scholarship, fellowship, one of 5 students chosen from 3,000 applicants. Sophia. His voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Are you kidding me right now? Harvard? With a fellowship? This is insane. This is incredible. I'm literally jumping up and down in my studio right now. My neighbors are going to think I've lost my mind. And just like that, the crack in my chest started to heal a little. James's joy was so pure, so immediate, so genuine, that I could almost pretend my family's reaction had been a bad dream. Tell me everything, he said. Who called? What exactly did they say? When do you start? Are you freaking out? Because I'm freaking out, and it's not even my achievement. I told him every detail I could remember, and James listened like it was the most fascinating story he'd ever heard. He asked follow-up questions. He wanted to know about the program, the fellowship, what this meant for my future. He treated my news like the life-changing event it was. We have to celebrate, he said. Properly. Not just pizza and terrible beer, but but real celebration. I'm taking you somewhere fancy when you get back. Somewhere with cloth napkins and wine that costs more than textbooks. You don't have to do that. Are you kidding? My best friend just got a full ride to Harvard. I'm pretty sure this is the proudest moment of my life, and I didn't even do anything except know you. After we hung up, I sat on my bed feeling the sharp contrast between James's reaction and my family's. James was proud of me. James understood what this meant. James saw this achievement for what it was: validation of 4 years of hard work, proof that I belonged in academic spaces that had always felt impossibly out of reach. My family saw it as nice. I spent the rest of that morning lying on my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process not just the Harvard news, but the dawning realization that my family might never be capable of celebrating my achievements the way I needed them to. It wasn't that they were bad people. They weren't cruel or abusive or deliberately hurtful. They were just completely incapable of seeing me as anything other than Jake's responsible older sister, who would always be fine on her own. When I came downstairs for lunch, they were in the living room surrounded by college brochures and campus maps. Jake was sprawled on the couch with his laptop, researching something about UW's business program. My parents sat on either side of him, reading over his shoulder and offering commentary. "How's the Harvard planning going?" my mother asked when she noticed me in the doorway. "I literally just found out 3 hours ago, Mom." "Right, of course. Well, I'm sure you'll figure it all out. You always do." And there it was. The fundamental assumption that had shaped my entire relationship with my family. I would figure it out. I always did. I didn't need help or support or celebration because I was competent and self-sufficient and didn't require the kind of attention Jake needed, except I did need those things. I just never asked for them because I'd learned early that asking led to disappointment. That afternoon, I made an excuse about needing to get back to Portland early and packed my bag. Nobody tried to convince me to stay longer. Nobody asked if I wanted to do anything special to celebrate my Harvard acceptance. Nobody seemed particularly sorry to see me go. Jake gave me a distracted wave from the couch. My father handed me $40 for gas, as if I was still 17 and needed an allowance. My mother hugged me goodbye and reminded me to call more often. "We're so proud of you, honey," she said, and I could tell she meant it. She was proud of me the way you're proud of a successful acquaintance. Impressed but not emotionally invested. The drive back to Portland felt like an escape. With every mile I put between myself and my family's house, I could breathe a little easier. By the time I reached the city limits, I'd made a decision. I was done trying to earn their attention and approval. I was done competing with Jake for scraps of recognition. I was done pretending that their inability to see me was somehow my fault. I had James. I had Harvard. I had a future that I'd built with my own hands and my own brain and my own determination. And maybe that was enough. But I was wrong about being done with my family's drama. Because 3 days later, they called with a request that would show me exactly how little they understood about respect, boundaries, or basic human decency. The call came on Thursday evening while James and I were celebrating at Clyde Common, the fancy restaurant he'd insisted on taking me to. We were sharing a bottle of wine that cost more than my usual weekly grocery budget, and I was wearing the one dress I owned that didn't come from Target. James had ordered something with duck confit, and I'd gotten the salmon with some kind of reduction that I couldn't pronounce but tasted like heaven. "This is how the other half lives," I said, gesturing around the restaurant with my wine glass. The lighting was soft and warm, the servers moved with quiet efficiency, and every plate that passed our table looked like a work of art. "Get used to it," James said, grinning. "You're going to be a Harvard graduate student. I expect you'll be dining in establishments like this regularly once you're hobnobbing with future senators and cabinet members." My phone buzzed against the table, Mom calling. I almost declined the call, but something made me pick up. "Hi, Mom. Sophia, perfect timing. I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, I have a huge favor to ask, and I really hope you'll say yes." The tone was different from our usual conversations. Warmer, more engaged, the way she sounded when she called Jake about something important. "What's up?" "Well, Jake's graduation party is this Saturday, and we've run into a little problem. The caterer we hired just had a family emergency and had to cancel. Last minute, I know it's crazy, but we have 40 people coming and nothing prepared." I waited for her to continue, though I already had a sinking feeling about where this was heading. "I remembered how beautifully you catered that event for your sorority last year, and I thought maybe you could help us out. You're so organized and creative, and you always know how to make everything perfect on a budget." James was watching me across the table, one eyebrow raised in question. I held up a finger, asking him to wait. You want me to cater Jake's graduation party? Well, not professionally or anything, just family helping family. I thought maybe you could plan the menu, do the shopping, handle the cooking. Nothing too fancy, just appetizers and a nice spread. You're so good at that kind of thing. I took a sip of wine, trying to process what I was hearing. Mom, I live 3 hours away, and I have plans this weekend. Oh, plans with that friend of yours? I'm sure he'd understand. This is family, Sophia. Jake's graduation only happens once. So did mine. Last weekend. Of course, and we celebrated. We had a lovely dinner. But this is different. This is the party we've been planning for months. All of Jake's friends are coming, plus the neighbors and your father's colleagues. It's going to be a big event. I looked across the table at James, who was pretending to study the dessert menu, but obviously listening to every word. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was trying not to say something he'd regret. What about the cost? I asked. Catering for 40 people isn't cheap. Oh, we'll reimburse you for groceries, of course. Within reason. Maybe keep it under $300? I know you're good at stretching a budget. $300 for food for 40 people. At the restaurant where I was currently sitting, that wouldn't cover dinner for 4 people, let alone a graduation party spread. And when exactly would I need to have this ready? Saturday at 2. The party starts at 3, so if you could have everything set up and ready to go by 2, that would be perfect. Oh, and could you handle cleanup too? I know it's a lot to ask, but you're just so much better at these things than I am. I sat there holding my phone, watching the other diners enjoy their expensive meals and intimate conversations, trying to wrap my head around what my mother was actually asking me to do. Drive 3 hours each way. Plan, shop for, and prepare food for 40 people on a budget that would barely cover the wine they'd probably serve. Set up the party, work during the party, then clean up after the party. All for my brother's graduation celebration. The same brother who'd just been given a car worth more than I'd earned in 2 years. I can't do that, Mom. Can't or won't. Both. I can't physically accomplish what you're asking in the time frame you've given me, and I won't cancel my own plans to provide free labor for Jake's party. Free labor? Her voice rose with what sounded like genuine offense. Sophia, this is family. We help each other. I'd do the same for you. When have you ever done anything like this for me? That's not fair. We've always supported you. You didn't even have a party for my graduation. That's different. You don't like big social events. You've always been more of an introvert. I felt something snap inside me, like a rubber band stretched too far. I don't like big social events because I've never been the guest of honor at one. It's hard to enjoy parties when you're working them. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. It's one weekend. One favor for your brother. James had given up pretending not to listen. He was watching me with the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for his art, like he was trying to memorize every detail of this moment. I have to go, Mom. I'm at dinner. Will you at least think about it? Jake would be so grateful. This party means everything to him. What about my Harvard acceptance? Did that mean anything to anyone? Of course it did. We're very proud of you. But that's different. But that's something you accomplished for yourself. This is about family coming together to celebrate together. I hung up without saying goodbye. James reached across the table and touched my hand. Want to talk about it? They want me to cater Jake's graduation party for 40 people on a $300 budget this Saturday, after they didn't have a party for you at all. After they treated my Harvard fellowship like I'd announced I was changing my major for the 3rd time. The server appeared at our table with perfect timing, asking if we were interested in dessert. James ordered the chocolate tart without consulting me, adding, "And can we get a bottle of your best champagne? We're celebrating my friend's acceptance to Harvard with a full fellowship." "Congratulations," the server said, beaming at me. "That's incredible." A complete stranger was more excited about my achievement than my own family. The champagne arrived with 2 flutes and a small plate of complimentary petite fours. James raised his glass, and his smile was so proud and genuine that I felt tears threaten. To Sophia Johnson, future Harvard graduate, policy genius, and the smartest person I know. Your family doesn't deserve you, but Harvard definitely does. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift inside me. Maybe James was right. Maybe I'd been so focused on earning my family's approval that I'd forgotten I didn't actually need it to succeed. I had proof of my worth sitting in my email inbox in the form of a Harvard acceptance letter. I had a best friend who believed in me unconditionally. I had a future full of possibilities. I didn't need my family's recognition to know I was valuable, but I was about to learn that they didn't just fail to recognize my value. They actively resented it. The text started the next morning while I was in my American Economic Policy seminar, my final class before graduation. My phone buzzed against my leg every few minutes, but I ignored it until the lecture ended and I was walking across campus toward James's studio. 7 messages from my mother, each one escalating in tone and desperation. Please reconsider about Saturday. I'm really in a bind here. Called 3 catering companies. Cheapest quote was $1,200. We can't afford that on top of Jake's car payments. Your father thinks you're being selfish. This is your brother we're talking about. Found a grocery store that does party platters, but they're terrible quality. You know how important this party is. Jake is really disappointed. He was looking forward to having his big sister there to help celebrate. Fine, if you won't help with the catering, can you at least come early to help set up? And maybe stay late to help clean up? I don't understand why you're punishing Jake for our mistake with the caterer. I stood in the middle of the campus quad, reading these messages while students walked around me celebrating the end of finals week. Everyone else looked happy, relieved, ready to move on to whatever came next. I felt like I was trapped in quicksand, being pulled down by expectations and obligations I'd never agreed to. I called James instead of responding to the texts. How bad? He asked, answering on the first ring. Scale of 1 to 10, about a 15. I'll put on coffee, come on over. James's studio apartment was exactly what you'd expect from an art student. Canvases everywhere, paint tubes scattered across every surface, the smell of turpentine mixed with whatever incense he'd been burning. But it was also warm and welcoming in a way my family's pristine house had never been. James had hung string lights around the windows and filled every corner with plants he'd rescued from various clearance bins. It felt like a home, not a showroom. I found him at his easel, adding details to what looked like a painting of the Portland skyline. Your graduation present, he said, not looking up from his brushwork. Figured you'd want something to remember where you came from when you're conquering Washington, D.C. I showed him the texts. He read them all, his expression growing darker with each message. They bought Jake a car worth $40,000, but they can't afford $1,200 for his graduation party catering. Apparently not. And instead of scaling back the party or asking Jake to contribute from his part-time job, they decided to guilt trip you into providing free labor. Family helps family, James. Didn't you know that? He set down his paintbrush and turned to face me fully. Soph, can I say something that might be hard to hear? Go ahead. Your family doesn't treat you like family. They treat you like staff. The words hit me like cold water, sharp and clarifying. What do you mean? Think about it. When do they contact you? When they need something. When do they celebrate you? Only when it doesn't interfere with celebrating Jake. When do they offer support? Never, because they assume you don't need it. That's not how you treat someone you love. That's how you treat someone whose value is based entirely on what they can do for you. I sank into his paint-splattered couch, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. So what am I supposed to do? Just stop talking to them entirely. You're supposed to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. My phone buzzed with another text. This time it was from my father. Your mother is very upset. This isn't like you to be so unreasonable. Please call her back and work this out. James read it over my shoulder. See, they're not asking you to reconsider because they value you or because they want you at the party. They're asking because they need free labor and they're frustrated that you're not providing it. Maybe I should just do it. Get it over with. How hard could it be? Sophia, James grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. You just got accepted to Harvard with a full fellowship. You're about to start one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. You're brilliant and accomplished, and you have an incredible future ahead of you. Why are you even considering sacrificing your weekend to provide free catering for people who couldn't be bothered to celebrate your achievements? I knew he was right. Logically, rationally, I knew everything he was saying made perfect sense, but emotionally, I was still that little girl desperate for her parents' approval, still hoping that if I just helped enough, sacrificed enough, proved my usefulness enough, they'd finally see me the way I wanted to be seen, because they're my family. No, James said gently. They're people who share your DNA. Family is supposed to support you, celebrate you, have your back when things get tough. Family doesn't exploit your good nature and then guilt trip you when you set boundaries. I spent the afternoon at James's place, helping him clean paintbrushes and avoiding my phone. We ordered Thai food and watched terrible movies, and for a few hours, I could almost forget about the crisis unfolding in my family text thread. But eventually, I had to deal with it. That evening, I crafted a response to my mother's messages. I understand you're in a difficult situation with the catering, but I can't help this weekend. I hope you're able to find a solution and that Jake has a wonderful party. The response came back within minutes. I'm very disappointed in you, Sophia. This isn't the daughter I raised. That text sat in my phone like a small bomb, waiting to explode my carefully constructed sense of self-worth, because part of me wondered if she was right. Maybe I was being selfish, maybe this was a reasonable request, and I was overreacting. Maybe family was supposed to sacrifice for each other, and I was failing some fundamental test of loyalty. But then I thought about Harvard, about the phone call that had changed my life, about the way my family had reacted to the biggest achievement of my academic career, like I'd announced I was changing my hair color, and I thought about James, painting my graduation present, while my actual family planned a party they didn't think I deserved. I turned off my phone and went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easily. I lay there staring at the ceiling, knowing that tomorrow would bring more pressure, more guilt, more attempts to manipulate me into compliance. I had no idea how right I was, or how much worse things were about to get. Friday morning brought a call from Jake himself, which immediately set off alarm bells because Jake never called me, ever. Our communication consisted entirely of birthday texts and the occasional tagged meme on social media. Hey, Sophia. His voice had that careful, practiced tone that meant someone had coached him on what to say. Hi, Jake. How's senior week going? Pretty good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about this weekend. Mom told me you can't help with the party. I waited for him to continue, not trusting myself to respond without sarcasm. I get that you're busy and everything, but this party is really important to me. All my friends are going to be there, plus Dad's work people and the neighbors. It's kind of a big deal. I'm sure it is. Mom's been super stressed about the whole catering thing, and Dad's talking about canceling the whole party if we can't figure something out. I just thought maybe you could help us out. You know? Family helping family. There it was again. That phrase they all kept using, like a magic spell that would override my objections. Jake, I'm 3 hours away. I have plans this weekend, and I can't afford to feed 40 people on the budget, Mom suggested. What if we increase the budget? Like, what would it actually cost? For a moment, I was surprised by the question. It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged that their request might be unreasonable. For a party that size with decent food, probably $700 or $800 minimum, plus all the prep time, cooking time, setup, and cleanup. Oh, there was a long pause. That's more than Mom said it would be. Mom's never catered a party, Jake. She has no idea what anything costs. What if I paid you? Like, hired you properly? I almost dropped the phone. You want to hire me to cater your graduation party? I have money saved from my job. Not a ton, but some. And Mom and Dad said they'd chip in if it meant getting the party handled. How much money are we talking about? Maybe $300? And there it was. $300. The same amount my mother had suggested for groceries, now being offered as my full compensation for planning, shopping, preparing, serving, and cleaning up a party for 40 people. They wanted to pay me less than minimum wage to work a 16-hour day so they could avoid the inconvenience of actually planning Jake's celebration themselves. Jake, I make more than that working 6 hours at the campus bookstore. But this is different. This is family. You're right. It is different. Family should be more generous, not less. Come on, Sophia. Don't be like this. Like what? Like someone who values her time and energy. Like someone who's too good for her own family. That hit like a physical blow. Too good for my family? Ever since you got into that fancy school, you've been acting like you're better than everyone else. Like our problems aren't important enough for you to care about. I stood in my tiny apartment, looking out the window at the Portland skyline James was painting for me, trying to process what I was hearing. Jake, I've never said I was better than anyone. I've never acted like my education made me superior. You haven't had to say it. It's obvious. You think you're so smart going to Harvard. Too important to help with a simple family party. A simple family party that no one planned properly, that everyone expects me to fix at the last minute, for below market compensation while sacrificing my own weekend. See? There you go again. Using big words and logic, and acting like you're the only one who understands anything. The conversation was spiraling into territory I'd never experienced with Jake. He'd always been the golden child, the easy kid, the one who got along with everyone. I'd never heard him sound angry or resentful before. Jake, where is this coming from? You want to know where it's coming from? I'm tired of being compared to you. My whole life, it's been why can't you get grades like Sophia? And Sophia never gave us this kind of trouble. And look how responsible Sophia is. Do you have any idea what it's like being the screw-up brother of the perfect daughter? I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What are you talking about? Mom and Dad worship you. They bought you a car. They're throwing you a party. They've never done anything like that for me. Because they don't have to. You don't need a car. You figure out your own transportation. You don't need a party. You have your weird art friend to celebrate with. You don't need their attention because you're so independent and capable and self-sufficient. I've always had to be self-sufficient because they were too busy taking care of you. And I've always had to live up to your example. Do you think I wanted to be the kid who needed help with everything? Do you think I enjoyed being the one who couldn't handle his own problems? The line went quiet for a long moment. I could hear Jake breathing heavily on the other end, like he'd just finished running a race. Jake, I said carefully, I never knew you felt that way. Of course you didn't, because everything's always been about what you need, what you want, what you're achieving. Even now, when I ask for one favor for the most important day of my life so far, you can't be bothered to help. This isn't about the party anymore, is it? Maybe not. Maybe it's about the fact that my sister thinks she's too good to be part of this family anymore. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my silent phone, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Jake resented me. Jake, who I'd always thought had the easier path, who I'd assumed was happier and more loved and more secure. Jake felt like he lived in my shadow while I felt invisible in his spotlight. But what hit me hardest was the accusation that I thought I was too good for my family. Because maybe if I was being completely honest with myself, there was a grain of truth in that. Maybe getting into Harvard had made me feel superior. Maybe I had started to look down on their priorities and their choices. Or maybe Jake was lashing out because he knew his request was unreasonable, and attacking my character was easier than acknowledging that my phone rang again. This time it was my father. Sophia, I just got off the phone with Jake. He's very upset. I'm upset too, Dad. This has gotten completely out of hand. It's a simple request, help with a family party. I don't understand why you're making it so complicated. It's not simple, and it's not just about the party. Then what is it about? I took a deep breath, knowing that this conversation was either going to fix things or break them permanently. It's about the fact that you bought Jake a $40,000 car but can't afford to properly cater his graduation party. It's about the fact that I got accepted to Harvard with a full fellowship and you treated it like a minor accomplishment. It's about the fact that every time this family needs something done, I'm expected to handle it, but when I achieve something remarkable, no one seems to notice. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about my goals, or my challenges, or my dreams? When's the last time you offered to help me with anything? You don't need help. You've always been independent. Everyone needs help, Dad. Everyone needs support and encouragement and recognition. The fact that I've learned to handle things on my own doesn't mean I wouldn't appreciate acknowledgement when I succeed. We acknowledge your successes. You said my Harvard fellowship was nice. What were we supposed to do? Throw a parade? Maybe show a fraction of the excitement you showed when Jake got his acceptance letter to UW. Maybe ask follow-up questions. Maybe act like it mattered to you that your daughter achieved something remarkable. There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear my mother talking, though I couldn't make out the words. Your mother wants to talk to you. Sophia? My mother's voice was tight with frustration. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this attitude is very unlike you. What attitude? This selfish, entitled attitude. We've always been proud of you, always supported you, and now you're acting like we're the worst parents in the world because we asked for one favor. Mom, I've spent my entire life being the reliable one. The one who doesn't make waves, doesn't ask for help, doesn't cause problems. I've never asked you to sacrifice for me the way you're asking me to sacrifice for Jake. Because you don't need the same kind of support Jake needs. Says who? Did you ever ask me what I needed? Did you ever consider that maybe I wanted a graduation party too? That maybe I wanted my parents to be excited about my achievements? That maybe I wanted to feel like my success mattered to the people who are supposed to love me most? Of course, your success matters to us. Then act like it. We are acting like it. We're proud of you, but we don't make a big show of everything like some families do. You made a big show of Jake's high school graduation. That's different. How? How is it different? Another pause. Then Jake needs more encouragement. He's not as naturally confident as you are. And there it was. The truth I'd been dancing around my entire life. Jake needed encouragement, so he got attention. Jake needed support, so he got resources. Jake needed confidence building, so he got celebrations. And I didn't need any of those things because I was naturally confident, naturally capable, naturally able to handle whatever life threw at me. Except I wasn't naturally any of those things. I'd learned to be self-sufficient because the alternative was disappointment. I'd learned to be confident because showing vulnerability led nowhere. I'd learned to handle things alone because asking for help was pointless. I have to go, I said. Sophia, wait, let's figure this out. What if we hired a real caterer and you just came to the party as a guest? Would that work? It's not about the catering anymore, Mom. Then what is it about? It's about respect. It's about being seen as a person instead of a resource. It's about recognizing that I have value beyond my ability to solve problems for other people. I don't understand what you're saying. I know you don't. That's the problem. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I might throw up. I'd never spoken to my parents that way before. I'd never directly confronted them about the imbalance in our family dynamics. I'd never forced them to examine their own behavior. And I had a feeling things were about to get much worse before they got better. That evening, James knocked on my door with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. "You look like you've been hit by a truck," he said, setting the food on my tiny kitchen counter. "I feel like I've been hit by a truck, then backed over, then hit again." I told him about the conversations with Jake and my parents. James listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or making small sounds of disbelief. "So let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "Jake is mad at you for being accomplished. Your parents think you should provide free labor because you're naturally confident, and everyone is acting like you're the unreasonable one for setting boundaries. That's about the size of it. Have I mentioned lately that your family is deeply messed up? Once or twice." James opened the wine and poured 2 large glasses. "So what's the plan? Are you going to the party?" "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just apologize and smooth things over, like I always do. And the other part thinks maybe it's time to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own life. I vote for the other part." We ate pad thai and drank wine while James told me about his own family drama. His parents' divorce, his sister's struggles with addiction, the complicated dynamics of trying to maintain relationships with people who didn't understand his choices. It was the first time I realized that everyone's family was complicated, but not everyone's family made them feel guilty for succeeding. "The thing is," James said, refilling our wine glasses, "healthy families celebrate each other's achievements. They don't compete for attention or resources. They don't make love conditional on usefulness. So what does that make my family? Dysfunctional, but not irredeemably so. People can change if they want to. The question is whether they want to badly enough to examine their own behavior." Saturday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I'd forgotten to turn my phone back on after charging it overnight, so the full force of my family's reaction hit me all at once. The messages started around 6 a.m. with my mother. "Please call me. We need to talk about this." Then my father, "Your mother cried herself to sleep last night. I hope you're happy." Then Jake, "Great job ruining my graduation party. Thanks a lot." Then a series of increasingly frantic messages from my mother as the morning progressed and the party approached. "I don't know what to do about food. The grocery store party platters look terrible. Called 4 caterers. They're all booked or too expensive. Jake's friends are going to think we don't care about him. This is a disaster, and it's all because you couldn't help your own family. I don't understand how you became so selfish." And finally, at 11:30 a.m., "Fine. We're canceling the party. I hope you can live with yourself." I stared at that last message for a long time. They'd canceled Jake's graduation party. They'd actually canceled it rather than figure out an alternative solution that didn't involve my free labor. Part of me felt terrible. Jake really had been looking forward to this party. And regardless of our family dynamics, Graduating high school was an achievement worth celebrating. Part of me felt guilty for contributing to a situation that ended with disappointment for everyone involved. But another part of me felt something I'd never experienced in relation to my family. Clarity. They'd had options. They could have hired a more expensive caterer and adjusted their budget elsewhere. They could have asked Jake to contribute more of his own money. They could have scaled back the guest list, or changed the menu, or asked friends to bring potluck dishes. They could have postponed the party until they could plan it properly. Instead, they'd chosen to cancel it entirely and blame me for their poor planning and unrealistic expectations. That told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed my role in the family. I wasn't a daughter whose time and energy had value. I wasn't a person with my own goals and priorities. I was a resource to be deployed when needed, and when I wasn't available, they had no backup plan because they'd never considered that I might not always be available. James found me sitting on my couch in my pajamas at 2 p.m., staring at my phone. "The party was supposed to start an hour ago," I said when he knocked. But it didn't. They canceled it. They canceled Jake's graduation party rather than figure out a solution that didn't involve me. James sat down next to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive that his grandmother had given him for Christmas. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, relieved and guilty about feeling relieved. And angry that they put me in this position in the first place. Those are all reasonable feelings. Are they? Because Jake's right about one thing, this was supposed to be his special day, and now he doesn't get to celebrate because of this whole mess. Jake doesn't get to celebrate because your parents created an impossible situation and then blamed you when you couldn't magically fix it. That's not your fault. But if I just said yes? If you just said yes, you'd be working a 16-hour day for below minimum wage while your family enjoyed a party you planned, prepared, and served. And next time they needed something, they'd expect you to say yes again because you'd established that their convenience was more important than your boundaries." I knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. My phone rang. Mom calling again. I should probably answer it. "Do you want to?" "No, but I feel like I have to." "You don't have to do anything, Soph. You're allowed to take time to process before you engage with them again." I declined the call and turned off my phone. That evening, James and I went to see a movie, some mindless action thing that required no emotional investment. Afterward, we walked around downtown Portland, looking in shop windows and talking about everything except my family. It felt like playing hooky from my own life, but I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation forever. Sunday evening, I finally turned my phone back on and called my mother. Sophia. Her voice was cold, clipped, nothing like the warm tone she used when she called Jake. "Hi, Mom. I wanted to see how everyone was doing." "How do you think we're doing?" "Jake's graduation party was ruined. Your father and I are questioning everything we thought we knew about the daughter we raised. Jake is heartbroken and embarrassed." "I'm sorry the party didn't work out." "Are you? Because you don't sound sorry." "I'm sorry Jake didn't get to celebrate his graduation the way he wanted to." "I'm not sorry for refusing to provide free catering services on 3 days' notice." "Free catering services." Listen to yourself. This is your family, Sophia. Exactly. It's my family, which means you should treat me with at least as much consideration as you'd show a stranger. We've always treated you well. Have you? Because strangers don't expect me to work 16-hour days for $300. Strangers don't dismiss my achievements as nice. Strangers don't assume I have unlimited time and energy to solve their problems. I don't know where this attitude is coming from, but I don't like it. It's coming from 22 years of being taken for granted. Taken for granted? We've supported you, paid for your education, been proud of your accomplishments. You paid for Jake's education too, plus bought him a car. You've been proud of his accomplishments in a much more visible way. And you've supported him by solving his problems, not by expecting him to solve everyone else's. Jake needs more support. Why? What do you mean? Why? Why does Jake need more support? Why does he get extra resources and attention and celebration while I'm expected to be self-sufficient and grateful for basic acknowledgement? Because that's just how it is. You've always been the strong one. I've always been the strong one because you made it clear that being weak wasn't an option. Jake gets to be vulnerable and needy because you enable that. I learned early that showing vulnerability led to disappointment, so I stopped showing it. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time I asked you for help with anything? When's the last time I called you upset about something? When's the last time I expected you to solve a problem for me? You never, you don't. Exactly. I don't. Because I learned that asking was pointless. So I figured out how to handle everything myself. And now you use my competence as an excuse to give all your emotional and financial resources to Jake. We love you both equally. Maybe you do, but you don't treat us equally. And love without action is just a feeling. The line went quiet for a long moment. What do you want from us, Sophia? It was the first time in my life that anyone in my family had asked me that question. I want you to be as excited about my achievements as you are about Jake's. I want you to offer help sometimes, instead of always expecting me to provide it. I want you to treat my time and energy like they have value. I want you to see me as a person, not just as the responsible one who handles things. I don't know how to do that. Then maybe you should figure it out, because I'm not going to keep accepting scraps of attention while Jake gets the full meal. Are you saying you don't want to be part of this family anymore? I'm saying I want to be part of a family that treats me like I matter. You do matter. Then act like it. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding like I'd just finished a marathon. I'd never been so direct with my mother. I'd never made demands or stated my needs so clearly. I'd never forced her to confront the inequality in how she treated her children. I had no idea if anything would change, but I knew that I'd finally stopped pretending the problem was in my head. The next few weeks passed in relative quiet. My family didn't call, and I didn't reach out to them. I graduated from Portland State with James cheering from the audience, took a part-time job at a local nonprofit to save money for my move to Boston, and started researching apartments near Harvard. James finished my graduation present, a beautiful painting of the Portland skyline at sunset, with tiny details that captured all our favorite places around the city. He'd painted the laundromat where we'd met, the coffee shop where we'd planned our futures, the bridge we'd walked across countless times during late-night conversations about life and dreams, and whether we'd ever figure out how to be adults. Something to remember where you came from, he said when he presented it to me. And everyone who believed in you from the beginning. I hung it in my apartment where I could see it from my desk, a reminder that I had people in my life who celebrated my achievements without expecting anything in return. 3 weeks after Jake's canceled graduation party, my father called. Sophia, we need to talk. Okay, can you come home this weekend? There are some things we need to discuss as a family. What kinds of things? It's better to have this conversation in person. I almost said no automatically. The thought of driving 3 hours to sit in my parents' perfect living room while they explained why I was wrong about everything felt exhausting. But something in my father's tone made me reconsider. He sounded tired, uncertain, nothing like his usual confident self. Fine, but I'm not staying overnight, and I'm not providing free labor for anything. Understood. Saturday morning, I made the familiar drive to Bellevue with a mixture of dread and curiosity. What could they possibly want to discuss that required a family meeting? Were they planning to cut me off financially? Demand an apology? Lay down ultimatums about my behavior? I pulled into the driveway behind my father's Mercedes, noting that Jake's new BMW was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he was out with friends, or maybe this conversation was going to happen without him. My mother answered the door before I could knock, looking older than I remembered. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked like she'd been crying recently. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The house felt different, somehow. Quieter, less polished, like the energy that usually hummed through it had been turned down. My father was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and what looked like a stack of financial papers. "Sit down, honey," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We have some things to tell you." I sat down warily, accepting the cup of coffee my mother offered, but not drinking it. "First," my father began, "we want to apologize for how we handled Jake's graduation party. You were right. It was unfair to expect you to solve our problem at the last minute with no compensation." I blinked. Sure, I'd misheard. "I'm sorry. What?" "We were wrong," my mother said, sitting down next to my father. "We put you in an impossible position and then blamed you when you couldn't fix it." "Why the change of heart?" "Several reasons," my father said. "Jake's been doing a lot of thinking about what happened, and he wanted us to understand some things about how this family works." "Jake wanted you to understand." He pointed out some patterns in how we treat you versus how we treat him. Patterns we'd never really noticed before. My mother reached for a tissue from the box on the table. "He said that you've been the family problem solver since you were old enough to solve problems, and that we've been taking advantage of that without realizing it. He also said," my father continued, that we never ask him to sacrifice for you the way we ask you to sacrifice for him. And that when he thought about it, he couldn't remember a time when we'd celebrated your achievements with the same enthusiasm we show for his. I sat there staring at my parents, trying to process what I was hearing. Jake had advocated for me. Jake, who'd accused me of thinking I was too good for the family, had apparently spent the weeks since our fight examining our family dynamics and pointing out the inequalities to our parents. He also said something else, my mother added quietly. He said that he's been feeling guilty his whole life about getting more attention and resources, but that he'd never spoken up because he was afraid of losing what he had. Where is Jake now? He moved out, my father said. 2 days after his graduation, took his car and his savings and got an apartment near UW with some friends. He moved out. He said he needed space to figure out who he was without being the golden child. His words, not ours. I felt like I was in some alternate universe where my family members had developed self-awareness and emotional intelligence overnight. There's something else, my father said, sliding the stack of papers across the table to me. We've been looking at our finances, trying to understand why we felt like we couldn't afford proper catering for Jake's party when we just bought him a $40,000 car. I looked down at the papers, bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. We're in debt, Sophia. Significant debt. The car, the house payments, keeping up appearances. We've been living beyond our means for years. How significant? Significant enough that we might have to sell the house, my mother said. We bought Jake that car with money we didn't have because we wanted to give him a good start in life. But we can't afford to do the same for you. I stared at the numbers on the papers, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My parents, who'd always seemed so financially secure, so successful, so put together, were drowning in debt. Why are you telling me this? Because we realize that part of the reason we've expected so much from you is that we've been counting on you not needing financial support, my father said. We gave Jake everything because we assumed you'd figure out your own path, which you did, brilliantly, but that doesn't make it fair. We also realized, my mother added, that we've been terrible at actually celebrating your achievements because we were so focused on Jake's struggles that we took your successes for granted. The Harvard Fellowship, for example, my father said. That's an incredible achievement. Life-changing. The kind of thing that should have been the biggest celebration of the year. And we treated it like a footnote to Jake's high school graduation. I sat there looking at my parents, really looking at them, for what felt like the first time in years. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating, more human. They looked like people who'd made mistakes and were trying to figure out how to fix them. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, my mother said immediately. We want to give you something. We can't give you $40,000 or a fancy graduation party, my father said. But we can give you something that might be more valuable, which is recognition, respect. The acknowledgement that you deserve to be celebrated and supported and valued for who you are, not just what you can do for other people. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. We're proud of you, Sophia. We've always been proud of you. But we've done a terrible job of showing it. We assumed that because you were so capable and independent, you didn't need the same kind of validation Jake needed. But everyone needs validation, my father added. Everyone needs to feel seen and valued by their family. We failed you in that regard, and we're sorry. I felt tears starting to form, but they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally feeling heard. We want to throw you a proper graduation party, my mother said. A celebration that's actually about you and your achievements. Nothing fancy, we can't afford fancy anymore, but something that shows how proud we are of everything you've accomplished. And we want to start over, my father said. With better boundaries, better communication, and a more equitable relationship between all of us. Jake suggested family therapy, my mother added, to help us figure out how to be a healthier family going forward. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at my parents' faces. They looked hopeful but uncertain, like they weren't sure if I'd accept their apology or walk away entirely. I'd like that, I said quietly. All of it. The party, the therapy, the fresh start. Really? My mother's voice was filled with relief. Really? But I have some conditions. Name them. First, no more last-minute requests for free labor. If you need help with something, ask me properly. Give me adequate notice, and accept that I might say no. Agreed. Second, equal treatment. If Jake gets financial support for something, I want the same consideration. If I achieve something significant, I want the same level of celebration Jake gets. Absolutely. Third, family therapy is non-negotiable. We all go, we all participate, and we all commit to doing the work to change these patterns. And fourth, I said, looking directly at my mother, you have to learn to see me as a person with my own needs and desires, not just as the responsible one who handles things. I want you to ask about my life, my goals, my challenges. I want you to offer support sometimes, instead of always expecting me to provide it. I don't know how to do that, my mother said honestly. But I want to learn, then we'll figure it out together. My father cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Jake wanted us to give you this. He handed me an envelope with my name written on it in Jake's messy handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter on notebook paper. Sophia, I'm sorry for being such an ass about everything. You were right about the family stuff, and I was wrong to blame you for problems that weren't your fault. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, and I realized that I've been jealous of you my whole life. Not because you get more attention, because obviously you don't, but because you're actually good at things. You're smart and capable, and you figure stuff out on your own. I've always felt like the screw-up little brother who needed constant help and supervision. I guess I resented you for being everything I wasn't, but that's not your fault. It's not your fault that I needed more help. And it's not your fault that Mom and Dad gave me more resources. You deserved better from all of us. I hope we can start over and be actual siblings instead of whatever weird dynamic we had before. Also, I'm paying for your graduation party. I sold some stuff and picked up extra shifts at work. It's the least I can do. Jake P.S. James called me. I like him. You should definitely keep that one around. I read the letter twice, then looked up at my parents. James called Jake? Apparently my father said. Jake said James was very polite but very clear about how proud he was of you, and how disappointed he was in how we'd been treating you. He also said, my mother added with a small smile, that anyone who couldn't see how extraordinary you are didn't deserve to be in your life. I felt my heart swell with affection for James, who'd apparently appointed himself my advocate, even when I didn't know I needed one. So, my father said, are we going to plan this graduation party? We're going to plan this graduation party. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually part of my family instead of just adjacent to it. 2 weeks later, we had my graduation party in my parents' backyard. Nothing fancy barbecue and potluck sides, folding tables from the church, paper plates and plastic cups. But it was genuinely about me and my achievements. My parents had printed photos of me throughout college, created a poster board with my acceptance letter to Harvard, and invited my professors, my coworkers from the bookstore, and everyone who'd been part of my journey. James came, of course, and charmed my entire family with his stories about our adventures and his obvious pride in my accomplishments. Jake showed up too, awkward but trying, making an effort to talk to my friends and ask questions about my plans for grad school. But the best part was watching my parents actually celebrate me. My mother gave a toast about how proud she was of my determination and intelligence. My father told embarrassing stories about my childhood academic achievements that he'd apparently been saving up for years. They asked James about his art, invited my professors to share stories about my work, and generally treated me like the guest of honor I should have been all along. This is what it feels like, I told James as we sat on the back porch, watching my family clean up while arguing good-naturedly about the best way to fold a tablecloth. What feels like? Being celebrated, being seen, having a family that actually acts like they're proud of you. You deserve this every day, James said, bumping my shoulder with his. Not just on special occasions, I know, I'm starting to believe that. And I was. For the first time in my life, I was starting to believe that I deserved love and celebration and support, not because of what I could do for other people, but because of who I was. I was starting to understand that my achievements were worth celebrating, that my needs were worth considering, that my boundaries were worth respecting. It had taken a crisis, and several difficult conversations, and the threat of losing each other entirely, but my family was finally learning to see me. Really see me, and I was learning to see myself the way James had always seen me, as someone worthy of love, respect, and celebration just exactly as I was. If you've made it this far in my story, you're probably wondering what the point of all this is. Why did I share this deeply personal family drama with thousands of strangers on the internet? What am I hoping you'll take away from hearing about my journey from invisible daughter to Harvard graduate student? The truth is, I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone. I know there are others out there who felt invisible in their own families, who've been expected to be the responsible one while watching someone else get celebrated for their achievements. I know there are people who've bent themselves into pretzels trying to earn love and approval from people who should have given it freely. If that's you, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. You're not selfish for wanting recognition. You're not demanding for expecting equal treatment. You're not wrong for setting boundaries, even with family members who don't like those boundaries. I also want you to know that sometimes families can change, not always, and not without a lot of work. But sometimes, my family is far from perfect. We still fall into old patterns sometimes, and family therapy is an ongoing process, not a quick fix. But they were willing to look at their behavior, acknowledge their mistakes, and commit to doing better. Not every family is capable of that kind of growth, but mine was, and yours might be too. But here's the most important thing I learned. You don't need your family's approval to be worthy of love and celebration. James saw my value long before my parents learned to acknowledge it. My professors recognized my potential when my family was too distracted to notice. Harvard offered me a fellowship based on my merits, not on whether my family thought I deserved recognition. Your worth isn't determined by how well your family celebrates you. Your achievements don't become less significant because the people who should be proudest of you fail to show up. Your boundaries don't become less important because family members guilt trip you for having them. I'm heading to Harvard in the fall with a full fellowship, a clear sense of my own value, and a family that's learning to see me as I am, rather than as they need me to be. I'm also bringing James, who got into a graduate art program at MIT, and will be just across the river, continuing to paint my life in colors I didn't know existed. But most importantly, I'm bringing the knowledge that I don't have to earn love through perfection, that I don't have to sacrifice my own needs to be worthy of care, and that being seen and celebrated for who I am isn't too much to ask from the people who claim to love me. If you're struggling with similar family dynamics, please know that you're not alone. If you're the responsible one who's tired of being taken for granted, you're not imagining things. If you're achieving incredible things while feeling invisible, your accomplishments matter regardless of who notices them. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to have your boundaries respected. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can do for other people. And if your family can't or won't provide that recognition, it doesn't make you less deserving of it. It just means you need to build your own family of people who see your worth. People like James, who celebrate your victories and support your dreams and remind you of your value when you forget it yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Share your own experiences with family dynamics, achievement, and learning to value yourself. Subscribe if you want to follow my journey as I start graduate school and continue building a life where I'm valued for exactly who I am. And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Your achievements matter. Your boundaries matter. You matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even family.